Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and I recently found out that the inside of Mandalorian helmets are covered in super glue. This is the way. No matter what happens to the Mandalorian people, no matter what tragic disaster has befallen their home planet, as long as Mandalorians still walk the earth, be sure there'll be a freaking Vizsla amongst them. Sure, there might be more famous Mandalorian families. I mean, you have the Fett's who cloned themselves a million times over. But the Vizslas, through sheer tenacity and adherence to tradition, seem to always stick around. No matter how hard things get, and no matter how many of their members orchestrate their own foolish self-demise. Today, we were going to take a look at Clan Vizsla and the big impact they had over Mandalorian culture throughout the entire history of Star Wars. Sometimes you get things right the first time around, and with Clan Vizsla, you had Tar Vizsla, who's the first recorded member of the family, and he was widely heralded as a hero and a leader of the Mandalorian people, not only by the Mandalorians, but by the wider galaxy as well. You see, the Jedi and the Mandalorians had been at each other's throats since the beginning of time. These two groups clashed not only ideologically, but also because of a less spoken reason. Both groups possess some of the greatest fighters and warriors in the galaxy, meaning that competition also drove this rivalry. Now, Tar Vizsla was a Force-sensitive human. Probably not the first Mandalorian to have such abilities, but he was the first to be accepted into the Jedi Order. This would have been a very remarkable occurrence, and we're not really sure how it happened. Generally, the Jedi sent out recruiters who looked for extremely young children to take away from their families. They're kind of like beauty pageant coaches for little children. I think there's a whole Netflix thing about it. The Mandalorians actually practice a similar thing as well, but instead of targeting Force-sensitive children, they usually just adopted orphans from the battlefield that they usually were responsible for creating. And so because of this animosity between these two groups, it's very unlikely that a Mandalorian parent would ever give their child, orphan or not, to a creepy Jedi recruiter who might not even be wearing pants underneath those robes, because let's be honest, that's what happens. I mean, one day you question it, why am I wearing pants? Because the robes cover everything, and then the next day you're like, oh, okay, let's try it out, and then that becomes kind of a regular thing. Anyway, Tar Vizsla would train with the Jedi, and when it was time to create a saber, he built the Darksaber, a black-bladed energy sword, which in my opinion now replaces Mace Windu's purple lightsaber as the coolest lightsaber. Now, Tar Vizsla would serve with the Jedi Order for some time, but then he would eventually leave the Order and lead his people as the Mandalore. Tar was a wise and powerful ruler, apparently, and unified many different tribes underneath the symbol of his Darksaber, and so to this day, whoever possesses the Darksaber has a legitimate claim to leadership of all of the Mandalorian people. Which is really cool, but it probably would have been better if Tar Vizsla set up a more normal way of secession that didn't involve duels to the death over a sword. It's a small thing. So after Tar Vizsla, the name Vizsla became very famous, and there was a certain amount of expectation that people had towards people in that clan. And then also the people in that clan had their own sort of expectation at what kind of role they would play in the larger Mandalorian society, which became a problem. Tar Vizsla was the head of the Vizsla tribe in the decades prior to the Clone Wars. At the time, the Mandalorians were being led by an individual known as Jaster Meril. His people were scattered across the galaxy, and most of the Mandalorians were living a nomadic life, traveling around as hired guns. Now, there have been some small incidents where Mandalorian mercenaries had committed, small crimes that involved, pillaging, raping, massacring. Typical Mandalorian stuff, but to an outsider, not so cool. More importantly, it was hurting the Mandalorian brand name, so Jason Meril set up the Super Commando Codex, a moral standard and guide to good business practices. It was a set of rules that fought against some of the more regressive and savage Mandalorian behaviors, like slaughtering the weak and defeated. Now, these restrictions kind of irked certain people, especially Tar Vizsla for some reason. I mean, honestly, the guy was just kind of a psychopath and extremely jealous that Jaster Meril was Mandalore and not him. Also, Jaster Meril believed that Mandalorians should act just like highly paid elite mercenaries. That was their ceiling. Tar Vizsla, however, was more ambitious. He wanted to return to the Mandalorians' more destructive roots as conquerors. The ancient Mandalorian crusades of the past were effective, but they ultimately led to the downfall of the Mandalorian people, so it's questionable whose philosophy was better. Ultimately, the man with less honor, Tor Vizsla, would create his own splinter group known as Death Watch. He would then bait Yaster Mural into an ambush during one of his mercenary jobs and gun down the Mandalore personally with a tank. This actually leads to Jango Fett's rise to power, as he was sort of Yaster Muriel's protege. Now, Tor Vizsla and Death Watch continue to hunt and try to kill Jango Fett and his faction of true Mandalorians after this incident. Tor Vizsla would set up another trap for his opponents, this time on Galadron. Using the local governor's help, he was able to convince the Jedi Order that Jango Fett's true Mandalorians were massacring the locals. The resulting battle of Galadron was completely unnecessary and ultimately destroyed Jango Fett's true Mandalorians and led to the death of several Jedi as well. On a side note, Jedi Master Dooku had actually led the Jedi mission there, and the whole situation really disheartened him and kind of pushed him away from the Jedi Order. Tor Vizsla would eventually be tracked down by Jango Fett and killed as well. Well, actually, a pack of dire cats ate him alive, but Jango Fett kind of cut his stomach open. And so it's thanks to Tor Vizsla that Clan Vizsla went from one of the most famous and loved clans to one of the most hated. Now, people believe that Death Watch disappeared with Tor Vizsla, but actually they were just hiding in plain sight in Mandalorian society. Next on our list is the individual known as Pre Vizsla. He was technically a part of Duchess Satine Kryze's new Mandalorian group. This was a pacifist and therefore very uncharacteristically Mandalorian government group that was trying to change the Mandalorians' way and adopt a more stable society based on economic development instead of constant warfare. Pre Vizsla was the governor of Mandalore's moon Concordia, but also secretly the head of Death Watch. Like Tor Vizsla, Pre Vizsla believed that he could be a better ruler than the person in charge, and so shenanigans ensue. First, he orders a terrorist attack in the city of Sundari, the capital of Mandalore. Pre Vizsla believes that these attacks hurt the new Mandalorians' legitimacy as rulers, but his role in the attacks was eventually uncovered by Republic emissaries, which forced him to flee Concordia with his Death Watch supporters. And so Pre Vizsla would spend the next year of the Clone War just kind of roaming around the galaxy looking for sponsors and allies to help him retake Mandalore, which honestly no one was really into doing. That is, until he met the Sith Lord Maul, who was also very desperate at the time. Together, the two would devise a plan to create a shadow collective made up of some of the most ruthless criminal organizations in the galaxy. The idea was to get these criminals to invade Mandalore in a false flag attack and then have Death Watch swoop in as saviors and then ultimately take control of the government. Everything went according to plan, and Satine Kryze's new Mandalorians were kicked out of the government. But shortly after, Maul challenges Pre Vizsla to a duel, something that as the new Mandalore, Pre Vizsla couldn't turn down. After all, his clan is all about tradition, and he ends up fighting a former Sith Lord, which is a terrible idea when you're using lightsabers. Darth Maul easily dismantles Pre Vizsla's defenses and kills him, and takes the Darksaber for himself, making him the new Mandalore. Now, two back-to-back psychopathic morons almost doomed Clan Vizsla to complete extinction and almost doomed the Mandalorian people to extinction, but somehow they managed to survive. After the Republic transitioned to the Empire, Mandalore would continue to suffer, first under the collaborator government of Mandalorian Gar Saxon, and then under the open rebellion led by Bo-katan and her Night Owls. Clan Vizsla would actually pledge their support to Bo-katan, but something known as the Great Purge would then happen. We're not 100% sure what exactly happened during the Great Purge, but we do know that there was a Night of 1,000 Tears, which does not sound great. And so now in the post-Imperial era, where the Mandalorian TV show takes place, we see that all is left of Mandalorian culture is the tribe. Bad times have clearly fallen upon the tribe. Now they're living like refugees, hidden and scared and out of sight. It's also here that we see the latest member of the Vizsla Clan, Paz Vizsla. Paz is basically the heavy for the tribe. He stands a head above the rest of the Mandalorians, and he flies into battle on a jetpack wielding a giant Gatling laser cannon. He's clearly a great fighter, like most Vizslas were, and he's also a pretty hot-headed individual, but at least this time around he's willing to listen to their leader, the Armorer. Vizsla is probably at their best on the front lines, taking orders from more rational people, and Paz Vizsla is more or less harmless, and even a bit likable, although he does get into a tussle with Din Djarin over some shiny Bes'kar ingots, so he still has that Vizsla jealousy thing inside of him. But Paz Vizsla, like all Mandalorians, do not have their fates written down in stone. There is still time for him to redeem himself, and potentially his entire clan. Clan Vizsla's emblem is the Shriekhawk, or in Mandoa, Jai Galar. These are basically birds of prey, and they would dive down from the heavens onto their targets, and they would emit a very loud shriek. Very terrifying animals. But like many things on Mandalore, the Shriekhawk would go extinct after the planet was turned into a desolate wasteland by the Galactic Republic military force. And so the Shriekhawk is actually a symbol of Mandalore's past. It's symbolic of something that was unable to evolve and therefore went extinct. And this in many ways sums up what happened to Clan Vizsla and most of the Mandalorian people. So there you have it, guys. That is the history of Clan Vizsla, one of the more hated clans in Mandalorian history. But again, anything can happen in the second season of Mandalorian. Maybe Paz will come back with his giant, Gatling gun jetpack combination. I would like to see that happen at least. Also, guys, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.